our adult formation speaker series. We are so glad you're here. We are going to get started because we want to use every inch of Al that we possibly can. So we want to start to hear what he has to say because it's always awesome. And I would love to read his bio for you. So for those, is anyone here for the first time hearing Al that you've never heard him talk? Awesome, very good. All right, well this is for you. Here we go. Al McCauley is the Director of Adult Faith Formation at St. Anthony on the Lake Parish in Pewaukee. He taught theology and history at Pius High School in Milwaukee for 24 years and was a religious studies adjunct for Cardinal Stritch University. Al is also the creator and host of the weekly Catholic YouTube web series, Fish on Fridays. Yeah, Chris is my husband's a big fan. If you don't know Fish on Fridays, you've got to just type in Fish on Fridays Al in YouTube and you'll get him. You'll get him. It's really very fun and interesting and lovely and informative stories. I don't know what else to say. I just can't encourage you to tune in enough. Chris makes me watch every week. Not makes me, but like Chris is like,
oh, the truth comes out.
Right. He always, did you watch Al? I'm like, I didn't know you were on a first name basis, but okay. He is also a frequent speaker throughout the Archdiocese of Milwaukee. He earned his master's degree in religious studies from Cardinal Stritch University in 2009. He is married, has 3 children, and 2 grandchildren. And it is my esteemed pleasure to introduce Al McCauley.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Good. The Fish on Fridays is something I started during COVID, and I have not missed a Friday. Every Friday I drop another episode on YouTube. Have not missed a Friday in 5 years, believe it or not. It's always about the life of a saint or a piece of Catholic art that I interpret or a teaching of the church, whatever the case is. 5 to 10 minutes at length. That's about it. Sometimes it may be a bit shorter than 5 or a little bit like 11 minutes, but it's right about the 5 to 10 minute thing if you're interested. I want to say the 3rd Friday of January coming up will be episode number 300. And maybe that's like crazy. It's like, wow, I don't know. I guess I like to talk. I don't know. But so I saw some of you raise your hands about who has not heard me before. I always say this. I have to say this. It's just like standard fare. How many of you have heard me speak here before? Okay, so it's either one of two things. You're either gluttons for punishment or it's time off purgatory. That's what you're hoping for. So I mentioned in church, if you were at Mass, I mentioned in church that these 2 gentlemen that we're going to talk about today, Giorgio Frassati and Carlo Acutis, were canonized on September 7th, about 2 months ago. And it's interesting because, I'm going to ask you this too, a little bit deeper than what I asked in church. How many of you, before today, be honest, before today, how many of you have heard of Pier Giorgio Frassati? Okay, hands down, about a half dozen or so. How many of you heard before today of Carlo? Everybody. Why is it that you know about Carlo? Anybody? I just off the script here. Yeah, just say it. Yes.
Canonized this year.
He was canonized this year.
I went to Rome.
You went to Rome. Okay. He had his miracles here.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that. Good.
His age.
His age, because he's 15 when he died. Oh, yeah.
He was online.
He was online. Yeah. I feel bad for Giorgio Frassati because it's kind of like everybody knows Carlo, but anyway. But after today, you're going to know about both these guys, hopefully a little bit more, and why they're important to our faith. So the story is kind of interesting, at least I think it is. Pope Francis was going to canonize Carlo Acutis in April of this past year, and Giorgio Frassati in August. And what happened was Francis passed away. And so we go through the conclave, Pope Leo is elected, and the whole Carlo Acutis canonization was put on the back burner. And so when Pope Leo was elected, he said, I'm not going to canonize either one of them separately. I'm going to put them both together and canonize them at the same Mass on September 7th. And that's what he did 2 months ago. And it's fascinating to me. I'll say this, maybe I was going to say this at the end, but I'll say this now. The high school that Carlo Acutis went to was a Jesuit Catholic high school. It was called Pope Leo XIII High School.
Oh, wow.
And Pope Leo XIV is a huge fan of Pope Leo XIII. And so that's why he took the name Leo. So the connection, the first saint that he gets to canonize along with Giorgio Frassati was somebody who went to the high school bearing the name of one of his heroes, Pope Leo XIII. I just thought that was kind of a neat connection. But I want to talk about them, but I'm going to ask you a question or two first, and I want to put a little bit of foundation to what we're talking about before we dive into their lives. Are you with me on that? So I'm going to ask you a question. In your minds, just quietly, for about 10 seconds, think about the answer, how you would answer it, okay? And then I'm going to ask you to shout some answers out to me. Make sense? So 10 seconds to consider this. Why is it important to remember heroic people who have gone before us? Just quietly think about that for a few seconds. All right, what do you have? Anybody?
They provide guidance.
They provide guidance. Good.
Examples of our Christian faith.
Example of our Christian faith.
Emulate.
Emulate them. Absolutely.
They're normal people.
Normal people. Hope. Yeah, they inspire us. I mean, we do this as a country. We remember, people from our history. We remember people from our church, saints, previous saints. We do this in our families, don't we? Don't we tell stories? Thanksgiving's coming up. Don't we tell stories about, remember that time when grandma said this or grandma did that or whatever? We do these things because it's a way to connect ourselves to something larger than ourselves. It's not just about you and me. It's people who've come before us. We stand on the shoulders of giants. And it's about people who'll come after. I have 3 children, and I can tell you right now, they tell stories about relatives they've never met because they've been dead. They know of these stories because we've kept them alive. And when we do that, when we tell the stories of people like these 2 gentlemen, we keep our faith alive. We have hope. We inspire ourselves and each other's. And that's why we do it. That's exactly why we do it. And it's important for you to understand this, that when we honor saints, what we're really doing is honoring and praising God. So as Catholics, I don't know if you've ever gotten this, but as Catholics, sometimes we can be accused of worshiping saints or Mary. Well, we don't. You know that, right? We honor them. We respect them. And it's important to understand the difference. What we're doing is we're really saying thank you to God for putting these people in our lives. So both of my parents have passed away. But I still thank God for their impact in my life. I don't say it's not them, it's what God did through them to affect me. In the same way that we honor saints, we're really giving honor and praise to God. Okay, so what I want to do is ask you is to put up a statement. It's maybe provocative, maybe not. Would you agree with this statement? Our age seems overwhelmed by noise. We're easily distracted and increasingly isolated from one another. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
What I love about these 2 saints that we're going to look at today is they're kind of like the antidote for a lot of this. I'm convinced of this, having studied saints a good chunk of my life. I'm convinced that God puts people like saints into our lives at a given place and a given time because we need to be redirected back to Him. And these particular saints, Giorgio, Frassati, and Carlo Acutis, are I would say again, the antidote to this. They're the helpers, the example, the hope, the inspiration of how we approach this kind of milieu that we're in. I would go so far as to say that they lived simply and they lived faithfully and they engaged others with joyful and selfless love. Now the key word in that bottom line, in my opinion, is engaging. That we don't engage each other enough. I mean, these are great tools. And it's great to send messages to people, text or calls or whatever the case is. But sometimes just that interaction, that human interaction, a lot of that's missing. And I think, if that alone can do a lot of that top line out, We're too distracted. We're not willing to see the other as much as we should. And when we don't, it's easy to just leave them at arm's length or keep them away from us. They're not part of our reality. All right, one more thing I want to give you in terms of foundation before we go further. In case you want to know, I may have talked to you about this in a different visit, but I think it's important that we understand the process of how we get to canonization. Okay? That it's a very difficult, long, arduous journey for somebody to become a saint in the Catholic Church. And I would say necessarily so. For centuries, do you know how saints were made like 1,500 years ago? You were loved in your community when you died. That's all it took. You were seen as other, special, set apart by God. Sancta, saint, in Latin means set apart. You were somebody in a small community, somebody passed away, and you start referring to them as Saint so-and-so. And then what would happen is that personality would become an example for sainthood. Different villages and cities we didn't have communication and mass transit like we do now. So people from other communities and villages would do the same thing. But there was no overarching vetting process to say, well, is that a legitimate person who's a saint versus that person? What do we really know about them? So the church said we have to put this process in place, that we can vet these people. We can see this is who they were, how they lived, and this is what it's going to, quote unquote, make them a saint. Okay? And that process got tweaked and tweaked and tweaked. And the real major overhaul of that happened under John Paul II about 50 years ago, to what I'm going to show you now. So this process that you're going to see that Carlo and Giorgio Frassati had to go through was nothing like the process that someone who lived 1,500 years ago went through. Make sense? Okay, so let's look at this. The first thing is, if the investigation into your life to become a saint starts, you are referred to as servant of God. Have you heard of somebody called Dorothy Day? Oh. Dorothy Day is servant of God, Dorothy Day. She's at this point, okay? And what does it mean for the investigation to begin? It means that you have to be dead for at least 5 years. There's no such thing as a living saint. Only metaphorically. My mom was a living saint. But she had 6 kids at 7 years. Oh. Now, if you knew my older brother Steve, you'd say, oh my gosh, she's a saint. No, I'm kidding. Steve was a handful. Anyway, he's all good now. But if you're servant of God, you have to be dead for 5 years. But what you're going to find is that the church has fine print. They have exceptions. There's always a caveat. You've all heard of Mother Teresa.
Oh, yeah.
She was dead about 18 months, and the church said, we're going to dispense with this 5-year nonsense with her, because everybody pretty much recognizes her sanctity. Make sense? Mm-hmm. So the Pope can bypass that, but it's usually, you have to be dead 5 years before you're even considered. Now, there are 2 people involved with you and your case for sainthood at this point. It's very arduous. These 2 people names, one you've heard of, one you may not have. The first one you might not have. His title is postulator. And the postulator's job is to find out every reason you should be a saint. They're going to read everything you wrote. They're going to talk to people who knew and loved you. They're going to get into the nooks and crannies of your life, man. They're going to investigate the heck out of you because they want to make sure that you've got all the markings for a saint. You with me on that? Yeah. The other person, you've heard this title before, is called a devil's advocate. You heard that? Yeah. The devil's advocate's job is to do everything opposite of what this guy did. I'm going to undermine this guy. I'm going to try to throw a wrench into every argument why so-and-so should be a saint. Not because the devil's advocate doesn't want them to be a saint. The devil's advocate job is to make sure we're backing the right horse. That this is a legit candidate. Okay? So this is, just that alone, I'm never going to make it out of this. I mean, it's not going to happen for me. So, I don't know. Well, maybe there will be, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But anyway, servant of God. So that's where you start. If for some reason your case is all, great, hunky-dory, let's move on to the next step, you are elevated to what's called venerable. Your life is deemed to be heroic and virtuous. Have you heard of Fulton Sheen, Archbishop Fulton Sheen? Yes. He is at this point. He is Venerable Fulton Sheen. Okay? And so people, when you're at this point, people can pray to you for your intercession. So you can pray to Fulton Sheen and ask for a miracle, his intercession, whatever the case is. If something happens that there is a miracle associated with that person, they now are up to the point of what's called beatified or blessed. Okay? These 2 gentlemen we're going to talk about were blessed before 2 months ago. So Miguel Pro is a blessed right now. Solanus Casey, are you familiar with some of these names maybe? They're at this point. One posthumous miracle has been attributed to them. What does posthumous mean? After your death. So people have prayed for your intercession. Some miracle has happened, usually medical. How do we explain this sudden change of medical diagnosis? Doctors and scientists can't do it, so it appears to be a miracle. Okay? Now, once you've reached this point, the church does something fundamentally different with you now in the process. Number 1, you get your feast day. You get a feast day that you remember. Number 2, your body can be exhumed if it's not in a fitting place like a crypt in a church or a shrine of some sort. It can be exhumed and placed into a different, more dignified receptacle. Can I say it that way? And in the process of that exhuming of the body, relics of that person, connections to that person, can now be shared. So you know what I mean by relics? Oh, yeah. So there's 1st, 2nd, and 3rd class. Relics are bone parts, hair, blood, anything like that. 2nd class would be something they wore. And a third class would be something that was touched. Which of those do we have most of? The touch. I mean, there's only one body, but there's infinite number of things we've touched, right? So you get the idea. So all of that's possible once you're at blessed. You've got one miracle attributed to you, and now you need what to become a saint? Another miracle. You need a second one, and then you are canonized. Now, canon means list. You're not put in front of a big gun. It's not that kind of canon. That's wrong spelling. Canon means list. If you get to this point, you're added to the list of people who are in heaven as saints. Okay? A second miracle is attributed to you. Does this all make sense? If I give you a test, would you be able to pass it? I won't do that. I used to teach at Pius for 24 years, and I teach adults now for as my career, I guess, whatever. And I always tell them, I'm so glad I can teach and I don't have to give a test. Because if I don't have to give a test, I don't have to correct a test. You know? People will come to me and say, oh, right now we're studying the Gospel of Matthew because we're going to start hearing from Matthew in Cycle A coming up in Advent. And so somebody comes to me and says, I'm not going to be able to make next week's class because I have a doctor's appointment or whatever. I'm like, you know what? I don't have to take attendance anymore. I'm going to miss you. I wish you were there, but you know what? It's okay. So those days are great. Now, all of this is great. Do you think you could all cut the mustard and become a saint?
No.
Say yes! Say yes! Yes! You're all saints in the making. This is the only hope I have. Like I said down here, we're servant of God. You have to be dead 5 years, but the church can dispense of that. We have a get out of all of that free card. It's called equivalent canonization. A pope or a church council can bypass all of that nonsense. It's not nonsense. I'm just kidding. It's all good stuff. We should have this vetting process. The church can bypass all of that and just say you are a saint by virtue of how you lived your life, heroically or virtuously. Or maybe the case of martyrdom or what have you. Okay? I'm going to give you 3 examples, recent examples of this equivalent canonization. And you may or may not have heard of these. I'm going to assume you've heard of all of them. Maybe not. St. Hildegard of Bingen, have you heard of her?
Oh, yeah.
12th century nun, mystic. She was a polymath. She did everything. She wrote liturgical music. She was a scientist. I mean, she was just brilliant. She was canonized as a saint through equivalent canonization in 2012 by Pope Benedict.
That's a long time.
Well, yeah, she had to wait a long time, but she had none of this. She didn't have any of the miracles attributed to her or anything. So they were able to bypass that. Not only was she canonized by Benedict, she was elevated or recognized as a doctor of the church. We have 38 doctors of the church. Of all the thousands of saints, only 38 men and women are the best teachers of the faith. Only 38. And of those 38, only 4 are women. So she's in rarefied air. All because of equivalent canonization. I'm assuming you've heard of the next person, Thomas More.
Yeah.
Martyr for the faith during the 16th century, early 16th century with the English Reformation.
Yeah.
Henry VIII.
Yeah.
Right. No miracles attributed to him, but because of his heroic martyrdom, he was equivalent canonization. And then someone from closer to our own time, John the 23rd.
Oh, yeah.
Pope John the 23rd does not meet the requisite vetting if you go by that pattern on the left. But he was canonized through equivalent canonization. Because again, very few people doubted his sanctity. Very few people thought he wasn't worthy of that and recognized him as saintly material, if you will. So this is what I call the only hope I have, right there. Equivalent canonization. Someday, maybe I can make it, but I don't know if I'll be all those miracles. All right. I want to talk about these 2 gentlemen here that we're going to look at today. And we're going to start on the first guy on the left, Frassati. We know more about him because he lived longer than Carlo. Okay, you see their years up there. Frassati's going to die when he's 24, Carlo when he's 15. Both young. I hope you'd say that, right? You'd agree with me on that? Yeah. Both way too young. You'll notice in their dates that there is a date in red. That's their feast day. Okay? So Giorgio Frassati died on July 4th. That's why his feast day is July 4th. Typically, the day you die would be the day you become that's your feast day, I should say. Okay? October 12th for Carlo Acutis. That's when he died. That's his feast day. So if you know or love somebody whose birthday on either day of those, it's always good to send a text, say, hey, today's, when you get to those days.
Are they both Italian?
Yes and no. I'll get to that.
Oh.
He was not born in Italy, but he lived in Italy most of his life. But Frassati, yes, was 100% Italian. Yeah. So let's start with Pier Giorgio. Can we do that?
Sure.
Yeah.
He was around in the early 1900s, so we have photographs. They're somewhat grainy in black and white, with one exception, and I'll share that in a few minutes. But I want to talk about him Just a wonderful guy. He's from Turin, up in the northern Alps of Italy. Okay? And that's really important. Geography is very important to both of these guys, and I'll explain that. But he's way up there in Turin. What is Turin known for? The Shroud of Turin, exactly right. But it's also known, at that time, it was known for a place that had incredible communities of poor people. They had extensive slum areas. And that's going to be important to Giorgio Frassati's life. So here he is on the right. That's his dad on the left. His dad was wealthy. His dad owned his own newspaper. And he became a senator eventually in Italy in the early 1900s. Now, why is it important? It's important because it's going to expose young Giorgio to politics. He's going to be immersed into a life of politics. It's not the only thing. In fact, it's not even the most important thing in his life. But he's well versed enough and aware of it to make an impact in his life as he grows older. And you'll see how that plays out as we go into his life a little bit more, okay? So we have pictures of him there, and it's hard to find a picture of him. You've seen one already, but it's hard to find a picture of him not smiling. So when the church was going through the process of seeing if he was, vetted to be a saint, they interviewed people who were still alive who knew him. His sister just died recently, within the last 5 years or so. Okay, but I mean, it's interesting because they had a lot of these people who were alive tell me about Giorgio. They'd sit down and interview him, and these are some of the comments they made about him. Number one, they said he made friends easily. He was somebody who could engage with people. Just had that knack to be able to talk to people, and it didn't matter who you are, if you were rich or poor, whatever else. He saw the humanness in him, which was interesting. Another thing, one of the quotes that was said about him was he was an explosion of joy. Now, I don't watch Saturday Night Live anymore, but years ago they used to have a little skit that was repeated every now and then about Debbie Downer. Do you know what I'm talking about? And it would be this girl, I don't know who played the character, but any situation, she would find the negative. And then the music would play and go, wah, 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 because she was... Now, no names. Does anybody know a Debbie Downer in their life? No names, don't mention names. Wouldn't you rather be called an explosion of joy?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh. I have to say something about this. This word joy, you're going to hear a lot by both of these men. And it's very interesting because we have more writings from Giorgio Frassati. He wrote a lot of letters. That was back before they had phones to text and stuff. It's interesting. If Saint like today, they're going to say, according to their text messages, this is what they, if their Facebook post clearly said, whatever. I want to say something about the word joy because it's not a throwaway word here. Joy is different than happiness. And it's very clear when you read the letters of Frassati what he's meaning. Happiness is fleeting. Happiness ends. You're going to have a good snack and a good cup of coffee and you feel really good. And in a few hours, what are you going to want? Something else, because you're going to be hungry. You're going to need lunch or something else. That's happiness, temporary. It's going to be fleeting. Joy is not temporary. Joy is something that is based in where we find meaning and purpose in our lives. And for him, he found meaning and purpose in the life of Christ. So that if something bad happens to you, and I say if, but we all know something bad will happen because we all suffer. At some point, we all have and will. Our faith, if we have that as our purpose and our meaning, we could still be people of joy because we know that Christ can transform that suffering as he did with his own life, right? 3 days after he died, he was able to transform it and come to life, to die no more. That's joy as opposed to something that's temporary. And that's why I say this culture thing that we have today, it's kind of like this, if you heard this term destination addiction, if I just get that car, if I just get into that house, if I just get that job, if I just get the next thing, it's always the next thing. Because we don't have the purpose or the meaning. We're looking for happiness, and he would tell us we should search for joy. And you can find that most readily in Christ. If you're okay with Christ in your life, then it doesn't matter which car you drive. It doesn't matter. All those other things don't matter as much. I think it's an important thing. It's not a throwaway line. One of the other friends that was interviewed about him called him the master of invitation. He was always inviting his buddies to go to the slums of Turin with him, to serve in soup kitchens. He would do that occasionally. He would go to Mass. He was a daily Mass goer. And I love this story. He was a very athletic guy. Very good eye-hand coordination. And one of the things he was really good at was playing pool, billiards. And he would challenge his buddies, and he'd say, let's go play a game of pool. if I lose, I'll give you $10 or whatever. If you lose, you're going to go to Mass with me. And that's something. Now, I am not suggesting that any of us become pool sharks and hustle that to get people to go to fill up your pews here. I'm just saying it's an interesting way to look at how he would always want to invite people to go to Mass, to go deeper into their faith, that kind of thing. I think it's just awesome to think about. As long as faith gives me strength, I will be joyful. Again, this is not happiness. This is joy. This is real meaning and purpose in his life. So I love this quote. I'm going to sprinkle quotes from both of these guys in throughout their lives as I go along here. So I told you before, I have a lot of black and white photos of Frassati. This is one I found that was colorized. And I thought, wow, it looks pretty good. But the more I looked at it, the more I just could not get past the fact that he looked a lot like Sylvester Stallone. I'm just saying, do you see a resemblance? I'm glad you laughed. I was thinking about starting the whole talk off with this, but I didn't want to start the talk off on a rocky start. See what I did there? Oh my God. Oh, that was the Debbie Downer. Yeah. I love it. All right, enough of that. Here he is laughing. Do you see what he's holding in his left hand? Yes, PSA, public service announcement. That's bad. Don't do that. That's one thing of his life you shouldn't use as an inspiration. Smoking was something that, if you know, this is not something that was known. The health risks were not known like they are now back in the early 1900s. So there he is having a cigarette next to the Monsignor down his left. You see that? It's kind of, I love that picture. He was a daily Mass goer. Now that doesn't mean he never missed a Mass. It means that he tried to go to daily Mass as often as he could. He had a very, very deep and strong connection to the Eucharist. And I want to say something about that because it's important, and I know I've said this before because I say it a lot, but I think repetition is the mother of all learning. Think about your faith life. Think about your relationship with God. It's a vertical thing. It's between you and God. But your faith is personal. It's never private. Do you understand what I mean by that? Your faith that's vertical necessarily has to influence how you deal with others. So your vertical and your horizontal make the cross. His daily Mass going inspired him to want to help others. And so he became a member of his St. Vincent de Paul Society in his parish. Do you know what the St. Vincent de Paul Society does?
Oh, yeah.
What do they do? Shout out anything they do. Take care of the poor. Donations. Are you familiar with the thrift store? Yeah. So they're always trying to help the others, the marginalized, the poor. And that was something he wanted to do. He went on his own accord to places like the soup kitchens and the slums of Turin, but he also worked at his parish. Now, something else I want to say about him was that he was a lay Dominican. Now, this is important too because the Dominican religious order is known for preaching and teaching. They were out there in the public sphere. And he really was drawn to that, partly because of his dad's influence. Because remember, his dad was a newspaper guy and a senator. So he was exposed to politics, and he saw way too many bad things going on in his time. What's emerging in Italy at this time? Ideologies like communism, like fascism. And what do those things have in common is they're godless. They don't put God first. And so he would see friends of his who would go to these ideologies because they could be members of a party or of a political party, and it would mean that they could get better jobs or they could get more notoriety. And he was very quick to say, he wouldn't finger wag them, but he would say, listen, remember your faith. You can't take God out of the equation. And so I love this line, men will trample their consciences for worldly honors.
Oh, yeah.
Is that not true? And he used exclusive language because, again, he's in the early 1900s. I mean, people, humans, not just men, women, humans will trample their consciences for worldly honors. And he would say this because he knew that those political ideologies were not necessarily consistent with the Catholic faith. And he wanted to remind people of that. So he would do it in a way that was encouraging and inviting without making enemies, that's why he's Italian, but I swear he could be Irish, because that's an Irish trait. I'm just saying. And I'm not biased at all, McCauley. Not at all biased. The part I love about Frassati the most is what he was an avid outdoorsman. He loved being outside. He was a muscular guy. He was a virile, strong young man. He was tall, strapping, all those kinds of adjectives you want to think about. He loved to hike. He loved to go sailing. He loved to mountain climb more than anything else because when he was out in nature, he would see God there. And so he would love to do that. Over and above all of those things, mountaineering was his favorite thing to do. I look at this picture and I'm like, there's no way you're getting me on the side of a mountain with the rope and no net. Unless the ground was like right there. You know what I mean? It's not going to happen. My wife and I took our kids years ago to the Grand Canyon. And my wife wanted to go nowhere near it. She was petrified that one of them was going to fall in. And there was this little ledge, and down below it was a ledge, maybe about up to your knee. You go down, you step down into it, and it went for a long way before you even get to the edge of it. And so she didn't know that, of course. So my son and I are like, "Ah!" And she's like, "Stop it!" And she did not enjoy our trip to the Grand Canyon. I loved it. Kids loved it. Now, this is important because it became a metaphor for life, for his spiritual life. Because he was known to say something in Italian, verso l'alto. Can you say that? Verso l'alto. It means to the heights. People would say, Giorgio, where are you going today? I'm going to the heights. I'm going to the mountains. But he would say that if he was going sailing. He would say that if he was going to Mass. Because he was going to something not just physical, but spiritual. Anything I do, think about this in the everydayness of your life. Anything you do it to the heights. Go to the heights. I gotta wash the dishes. Go to the heights. I know, that's not fun, right? The worst chore in the whole history of house cleaning is dusting, though. I hate it. Yes. I have to tell myself when it comes time to dusting, do it to the heights. I hate it. But think about how different our lives would be spiritually if what we did, we adopted that idea of, I'm gonna do this with all the vigor that God's given me. You know? It'd be a different way of looking at things, I think. I'm convinced of that. So we see pictures of him, again, oh my gosh, no rope this time, what is he doing? This picture was taken of him the summer, before he died, the year he died. And it was given to him as a snapshot. Again, this is no digital phone stuff, this is all, print out pictures. So somebody gave this to him, and he wrote the name of somebody, put the 1925, this is the year he died, and then he wrote verso l'alto on it. And he gave it to a friend to say, remember, always go to the heights. This was his message to others. This is arguably the most famous photograph of Giorgio Frassati. If you don't know who he is, or before today, you might not have seen this. But I love this because, again, it shows his ruggedness. He's got his hiking boots on, his walking stick. He's in the Alps. He's ready to do some mountain climbing. Can you see what's in his mouth? Again, public service announcement. Don't do that. Smoking's bad for you. But I love this image of him. It just seems so ordinary. It's so common. They're so natural. There's nothing extra special about him necessarily other than who he was. And I love this. To live without faith is not living but existing. We should never just exist but live. Isn't that just great? Yeah. I mean, too many people in our world just go day to day to day to day, and we just, I gotta get by, I gotta get through. But that's that destination addiction. Because if we keep saying that, then there's something else. I've just got to get through Thanksgiving. If I can get through Thanksgiving, it'll be fine. What's right after Thanksgiving? And if I can just do Christmas, New Year, everything will be fine. And then it's going to be something else. It's going to be Easter. In other words, we got to stop. This is why I love Advent. Advent is my favorite time of the church year because it really forces us to stop and pay attention and to slow down in a time of the year when we're not expected to do that in the secular world. So I love this about him because it's like, I want to live. I want my faith to be real in this moment, not just always the next thing. So it's a good quote, I think. Notice this is an icon. Notice what's gone? They took the pipe out. It's a modern retelling of his life there. I'm going to end with three things of his life, not the whole talk, his life. He's in his 20s, young 20s, 24. Two things I want you to know about him toward the end of his life are shoes and rosaries. I'm going to start with this one, shoes. He would go to the slums of Turin, and he would see people who had no shoes. He would see people who had socks, maybe, and they were holy. They had holes in them. Not holy because they'd been blessed. Holes. And he would say, that's not right. So he would bend down, untie his shoes, and give them to people. And then he would walk around the rest of the day in his stocking feet. He would go home, and his dad would be, what are you doing? I'm paying good money for those shoes. And he'd say, Dad, somebody needed them more than me. Now, his mom and dad were separated toward the end of his life. They had a troubled marriage throughout his childhood, and they ended up getting a divorce after he passed away. But what's interesting about his upbringing is they were not into their faith. They were very superficial. They were Catholic kind of by name only. where he gets this strong faith from is interesting because it's not coming from necessarily his example in the home. But his dad would be incensed that he would give away his shoes. But his dad was also like, I'm too proud to let my son walk around without shoes on, so he'd buy him another pair. And then a week or two later, he'd find somebody without shoes, and he'd do the same thing again. You know? Now, this is what's important. I always want to make sure we understand that these people are accessible. In other words, I don't want you to sit here and say, well, I'm not giving my shoes away. I don't see people without shoes, and if I did, I'm not going to, that's not realistic, McCauley. Why would I take off my shoes and give them to somebody? But you know what we can do? All of us can give our time. All of us can give time. And I'm going to give you a specific example. And I just started this a few years ago. It was a challenge, and I took it, and I'm very happy I have. And this is what I'd ask. Raise your hand if anybody in here has ever been asked by somebody else to pray for them.
Oh, yeah.
That happens all the time, right? So this is what I've started to do. If I'm at a coffee shop, or I'm at Target, both places where I've done this, and I see somebody I haven't seen in a while, or maybe a friend from church or whatever, and they'll be talking, and I'm like, hey, how are things? Oh, you know what? I'm in a bad place, work, or whatever else. And they'll, because they know I work in the church, they'll say, will you pray for me? And what I've done is I've started to say, I will pray for you. Can we pray right now? And then I'm not kidding. I've been in Target, I've been in coffee shops, I might hold their hand, it depends on the, or I might just say, and they'll look at me like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah. I said, we won't be like really ostentatious about it. Let's just stop, we'll just stop, and I'll just say a quick prayer. Lord, be with this person, help this person, whatever it is. I just kind of repeat back what they're saying, and we make the sign of the cross, sometimes we have it, but I cannot tell you literally without exception, every single time, the person who I've been praying with is absolutely moved by it. Because isn't it easy? And I'm not judging. I'm not. But isn't it easy? Because I've done this myself. When someone says, "Will you pray for me?" I'll pray for you. Isn't that easy?
Yeah.
But to stop where you're at and say, "Let's do it now." I'm not going to give you my shoes, but I can give you my time, and I can give you my prayer, and we're here together. Let's do that. Father said this: "Where two or more are gathered in my name, I am there." Let's pray together. Doesn't mean I'm not going to pray for them later on in my own private prayer, but let's do it now. That is so powerful to people. To engage somebody like that with our faith is hard. Oh my gosh, it is uncomfortable. It feels weird. But you do it a time or two, and pretty soon you're like, hey, I'm going to look for people who needs my prayer. No, I'm not going to do that. But seriously, I mean, it's something, don't give out your shoes, but give your time. Give 2 minutes of a prayer like that. Oh, it's so incredibly meaningful. I have found the people who have been on the other end of that. When he's 24, he's going to be working at one of these soup kitchens. And one of the things we know about these soup kitchens is people are poor, they don't have good health care, and they're sick, and they come there. He's going to contract polio, which is now not something you and I worry about. But back then, it was something that was fatal. In fact, here is strong, virile, muscular, athletic, 24-year-old Giorgio Frassati. He contracts polio, and he dies 6 days later. Wow. It ravaged his body that quickly.
Oh my.
6 days is all it took for him to die. It's really remarkable. What's even more remarkable is how shocked his folks were at his funeral, because what happened was hundreds of people that they had never seen before or heard of showed up to his funeral to pay respects. People from the slums in Turin, people on the streets, people who he had befriended, people he took to the pool hall to get him to go. All kinds of people would show up to pay their respects, and they were blown away. They were shocked by how many people showed up. What a legacy, huh? What a life. Yes, please.
Al, did you mention what the rosary part was? Did I miss that?
Oh, he would give, I didn't say that. Thank you for saying that. He would give rosaries away. He would keep 2 or 3 rosaries in his pocket, and he would give them to people. Again, I don't expect us to do this, but he would give them to people, and some people would say, I don't know what this is. I don't know how to do this. You go, well, let's go, let's pray, I'll show you. And so he would show them how to pray the rosary. I was kind of marrying those two together in terms of prayer. I don't know if we have to go and say, if you want to give rosaries away, that's great. My older sister's father-in-law used to buy crucifixes online. You'd get them like 100 pieces in a pack. He passed away now. But he would have them, he would keep them in his pocket, and he would give them out to people. If he was at church, or he would see something like a woman would have her purse on the pew in front of him, he would just drop one in there.
Oh.
He would put them on cars. I mean, he left them everywhere. He did this for years. When he passed away at his funeral, all the grandchildren stood at the exit of the church with baskets of those crosses. I have mine still in my car. It's hanging in my car. So this was not, he didn't spend a lot of money. And it's not something you even have to, you know those little Jesus figures? You know what I'm talking about? They look like little rubber Jesus figures. There was a story about just recently that people are buying them and leaving them in secular places, like in parks and in schools and in stores and stuff. It's just to reinforce, you never know who's going to need that.
Found one on a pickleball court.
What's that? You
Found one on a pickleball
found one on a pickleball court. Did you take it?
No, I left it there.
Somebody else might need it more than you. Good for you. That's great. Yeah, I mean that's what I mean by that. He would give of himself any aspect of his faith just to keep people engaged. I think that's great. So thank you for bringing that up, because I've just kind of married those two together. Faith enables us to bear the thorns with which our life is woven. Is that not true? I just want to very quickly give you an insight to the two miracles that were attributed to his intercession. Okay? So the first one happens less than a decade after he is dead. Okay? And these are the names of the people. This young person had a disease in the spine. The doctors actually caused the person to be paralyzed. And the doctors were convinced he was going to die. And the priest who was working with that person went to Turin, where he's buried, and visited his grave, prayed, touched a prayer card to his coffin, took it back, and the person was cured. The doctors couldn't understand the change of the physiology. So that was miracle number one. The second one happened just recently, less than 10 years ago. A torn Achilles tendon, I've never had one torn, but it's apparently like a very painful injury. Anybody here ever tear an Achilles tendon? You hear about it now. Painful? Yeah. You hear about it in like sports, like especially like football and stuff, where people, it's apparently very terrible pain. But this person had an MRI which revealed this severe tear, and people prayed to Giorgio Frassati over him and touched it, and the person said, this Juan said he felt warmth in his foot and he could move it and he didn't have any pain. So they put him through another MRI and the tear was gone. Wow. They couldn't explain it. The doctor's like, I've never seen this before. The tear doesn't just disappear. It's not there, it's whole. And so that was the second miracle that was attributed to him. I'm going to ask you a question. Just think about this quietly. If you want, actually, I'll give you about a minute at your tables. Do you know each other? Sure. If you don't, introduce yourself. There are two questions, but I'd love you to think about this with regards to Frassati. Where do you find God in the ordinary parts of your life, like he did when he was hiking or mountaineering? And what roles did friendship play? Does your faith play in your friendship? Do you understand that? Either or of those questions is fair game. If you don't mind just chatting about that for a minute, you okay? Are you comfortable with that? And then I'll call you back. These questions are often meant not just for now, but also later on. So if you get to, after this, if you go to Denny's for lunch, Packers don't play till tomorrow, so you don't have to go home and watch football. If you go to Denny's for lunch or something, you maybe could talk about this a little bit more. But I think it's important. I won't make you reveal what you were talking about, but I think it's important to remember the ordinary parts of your life. It's not always the big things. I made this point at Mass. Neither of these guys that we're going to talk about, this Giorgio and Carlo next, neither of them had great, what you would call saintly things. They didn't die for their faith. They had no miracles in their lifetime. They didn't receive Marian apparitions. They didn't write theological treatises. None of that. They were just ordinary, but they were so extraordinary in their faith. That's what we're all called to find the ordinary moments of our lives to apply our faith to that. Okay? And sometimes those are the hardest times to do that, especially with family. You know? All right. I love this. This is not a recent icon of him. Obviously, he was still blessed when this icon was made, but you see the verso alto to the heights and holding the rosary. All right, let's talk about Carlo. Carlo Acutis, we have less to talk about because he lived only 15 years. What we do know is that he is from Milan. Now, he wasn't born there. He was born in London. His parents moved to Italy, to Milan in specific, when he was a year old. Okay? Now, I like to say this. When I taught at Pius, I used to say, in our culture, you know you've made it, you've arrived, when you have your likeness made into a bobblehead. Okay? Or a comic book. He's got his own little graphic novel, so you can, if you like comics, so I don't know if that's because he was young and they're trying to appeal to children or younger people, I don't know, but he's got his own comic book, which is interesting, I think. What do we know about him? Normal life. He was the kid next door. He loved his dogs, he loved playing soccer, he loved going for hikes. When he would go for hikes, he would pick up garbage, and his friends were like, why are you doing that? He's like, well, because, got to do something. You can't let it sit there. Let's make the place nicer for the next person who's going to use it. Very simple, everyday kind of stuff, right? Very strong faith early on. What's remarkable, you're going to hear me say a lot of things about Carlo that are very, very similar to Giorgio Frassati. His parents were not strong. They were Catholic, but in name only. They didn't really go to Mass often, not even frequently. His mom, who's still alive, I'll show you a picture of her in a minute. When she was interviewed, she said, we weren't Mass goers on a regular basis. He would drag our butts to church. As a little kid, he'd say, I want to go to Mass. And so we would go because he wanted us to take him, which is interesting. That both of them had strong faith, but neither one really was implanted, if you will, in their family situation. Like Frassati, he made friends easily. One of the ways he would do this is, he would, at school, he would see people who were picked on, and the people who were being picked on, he would befriend. He would purposely go out of his way to invite them to his house. Let's go play video games. Let's kick the soccer ball around afterwards, whatever. Gave him a sense of belonging, okay? So it was a very easy thing for him. And he, you know, like Frassati, there were people who looked at him and kind of made fun of him because he was so into his faith, and they just didn't care. And you know why? It's not because they were mean. It's because their purpose, their meaning was Christ. And nothing else really mattered. They didn't give in to that because it's like, your opinion matters to me, but not more than what Christ's opinion matters to me, you know? And so that's an attitude that they had. I don't know if that's easy to do, by the way. I'm just saying it's what they had. So you see these photographs of him, always with technology, here with his little camcorder. He was a daily Mass goer like Frassati was. Very strong attraction to the Eucharist. Again, much like Frassati, that vertical relationship with God inspired him to reach out. So he would work in soup kitchens, all by himself. He would go. Keep in mind, he dies when he's 15. So he's going to soup kitchens when he's 12, 13, 14. When I tell students about him, I'll talk to high school students about Carlo. I have in the past. I'll say to kids, and if you have kids in your life that are like teenagers, like his age, grandchildren, whatever, I would always say this: they are not the future church. They are the church. There's no magical moment they become the church. They're the church now. So they don't have to wait to start doing things that would be living out your faith. You and I don't have to wait to live out our faith. We can do it every day with the people in our small corner of the kingdom. That's what we're called to do, and that's one of the examples they give. He was a catechist and a tutor at his parish, and he would come home and complain to his mom and say, the kids say the same thing every week. They say, I don't want to go to Mass, it's boring. And his mom said, well, why do you go to Mass? What is it about Mass that draws you in? He said, it's the Eucharist. I believe that that's Jesus. And she says, well, then find a way to tell them about that, because that might be the hook. That might be the thing to get them interested in Mass. And so he did. Being a big computer guy, he went on the computer and he started researching Eucharistic miracles. And some of you know this because you mentioned this at the beginning. And he started a database, a collection of, like a clearinghouse of stories from saints, from different countries, from different periods of history, where miracles associated with the Eucharist happened. And he would put them in story form so people could learn about them, and then maybe he would invigorate them to want to go to Mass. So he started doing this. I'm going to talk about that more in a minute. People would say, what are you going to do? You're going to go into computers? You're really good at coding and stuff? He goes, no, my plan is to be close to Jesus. That's my life plan. You know, again, I'll tell high school students. I just gave a talk to high school students recently again, and I said to them, I said, when people ask you, because they're all juniors, they were confirmation kids. I said, if people ask, I asked, are you getting the question right now? Are you going to college? I'm like, yeah. Like, are you getting the next question then is, what do you want to do? What are you going to be? And they're all saying the same thing. I said, ask yourself every time somebody asks you that, ask, and if you know somebody who's in high school and you want to ask them, hey, you're going to go to college, ask them this question instead. What kind of person are you going to be? If you're going to be a lawyer, if you're going to be a doctor, if you're going to be a nurse, if you're going to be a teacher, I don't care what you're going to be, but if you're a jerk, if you're not living your faith in that, our faith calls us to more than just being something like that. We have to live it. So what kind of person you're going to be is really a more profound question than what job you're going to have. Because it's the faith that we bring to that job. That's why I love this quote. He was into video games and coding. Did you know that about him? He loved playing video games. I don't know if you knew this. A lot of people don't know this when I tell them. Did you know that he had a limited screen time? He had a personal computer time fast. That if he was with buddies and they were playing video games, it would be an hour or 2 hours, whatever it was. He'd say, okay, you turn it off. And he'd be, what are you doing? We're in the middle. He goes, no, that's enough. Let's go outside. Let's do something else. He had this discipline at a young age to be able to, could you imagine that?
No.
So how many of you have a phone, like an iPhone or whatever? I have this little annoying thing on my iPhone that every Sunday morning, it tells me how much my screen time was. Anybody, you know what I'm talking about? The past week, you spent this much time, and I'm like, oh, I'm so bad. I'm so disappointed in myself. I think about that. Do I have the discipline to not use my phone so much? To engage more with people than with electronics, you know? And again, he used his computer to kind of house and make a database for Eucharistic miracles. He loved it. He said he would tell his students, "The Eucharist is mine." This is one of the quotes that he would attributed to him when they were going through the vetting process of his sanctity and sainthood. Now he would say over and over to these students he taught, "The Eucharist is my highway to heaven." You want to get to heaven? The Eucharist is the way to do it. So, unfortunately, short life. He's going to become very sick. He's going to go to the hospital. He's going to be diagnosed with an acute form of leukemia. He will die 4 days later.
Oh,
Isn't that crazy? Frassati and him both, 6 days and 4 days after diagnosis. You see him there in his coffin. He is in his Assisi. He was. Has anybody been to Assisi to see his coffin? Some of you have. So he was from Milan, but he loved St. Francis of Assisi. He loved Padre Pio, and he asked when he was dying to be buried in Assisi. And so there he is. That's his mom in front of his her. Can you imagine? I just can't imagine her pain. But can you imagine her joy being at his canonization? Isn't that crazy when you think about that? Oh, acute leukemia. When he was those 4 days, he said, "I'm going to offer my suffering up for the Pope," who was Benedict at the time. And he said, "I want to get right to heaven so I can do good. I want to bypass purgatory so I can get to heaven." Just like Frassati, his funeral was attended by people that nobody knew. His parents didn't know because he had helped so many kids and he had helped so many people in the soup kitchens he went to that they came to pay their respects. So a lot of similarities between the two. There he is. It looks like a normal kid, right? Jeans, Nike tennis shoes. He is not an incorruptible. I'll just say that. People have asked me that in the past. You know what I mean by that? Yeah. There are saints who have died who, when their body is exhumed decades later, seem to have not decayed. It's a sign of their sanctity, but it's really more for us a glimpse that there is no death and decay in heaven. That's what we should look. That's God reminding us of that. Okay? He looks like he's incorrupt, but he's not. He has been embalmed. He has had a veneer, if I can use this, bluntly, a veneer over him to keep him look fresh, if you will, because the church thought it was important, and his mom agreed, to keep him preserve him, if you will, how he looked when he was in life, so that people would be inspired by his youth. Okay? Youth would be inspired by him, if that makes sense. These are the Eucharistic miracles. Okay? You see these in posters, there's like 85 of them. And if you don't have the time or don't know what I'm talking about, you can go online. Here's the screenshot of it's still active. His mom and friends of Carlos have kept this database going of Eucharistic miracles. You can see in the bottom all the different languages it's available in. And if you've ever gone to it or if you haven't, you can go through history and you can go to a different country, a different saint, whatever the miracles are connected to. And it's just fascinating that it's a living legacy of what he started. Yes, please, read it.
We hosted them here last September.
Okay. How many of you saw that when they were here? Oh, was it moving?
Yes.
Yeah, very. So now that it's gone and it was last September, you could still see them online if you are want to go on technology and use it. If God can work through me, He can work through anybody. I love this because it's so true. And I said this at Mass. The idea that he was just this ordinary next door neighbor kind of kid that God worked through. Do I still have like 3 or 4 minutes, Sue? Are we good? Oh, okay. The two cures, the miracles associated with them, when they were cured, they were kids, so we don't have their names. We just refer to them as a boy or a girl from a certain country. There was a young boy in Brazil who had a genetic pancreatic malformation, and the physiology immediately changed when his photo was attached to the young person. And there was a little girl who was from Costa Rica, who was in Italy with her family, and they were bicycling, and she hit a rock or something, and she tumbled over, and her head cracked open on the sidewalk, and they thought she was going to die. And the mother, while she was in a coma, the mother traveled to Assisi to pray in front of his tomb. And when she returned, the girl had said the girl had a low survival rate, but after visiting the tomb, she started to breathe, and then she started to move slowly, and the doctors were able to get her to the point where she could go through physical therapy, and now she's talking around and they can't explain it. They thought she was sure for dead. So both those miracles relative to her own time, you'd agree, the last one is 3 years ago. So these are the miracles, if you will, that kind of, I don't want to say pushed him over the edge, but I'm going to put these questions up just for a second. If you want to think about them, I'm not going to have you talk because it's just in the interest of time. But when I think of Carlo, I think about his talents. He used his talents and his interests to get people to God. He used his skill with computers to attract people to the faith. You know, and then how can we be witnesses of our faith in small ways? It doesn't have to be the big grandiose things. I think sometimes when we think of saints, it's like, I'm never going to die out for a martyr. I'm never going to be writing any book. I'm not going to be a pope or whatever. It's really not about that. It's about how we live our faith day to day that really makes us saints, if you will. So there's his little icon. I'm going to skip this next story because it's too involved. I hope you're okay with that. If we have time and you want me to, I can go back to it. But who doesn't love a good Venn diagram, right? Just to summarize what we're talking about with these two guys, they both lived about 90 years apart, so they weren't contemporaries. But we know, what do we know? Well, he was a lay Dominican, and he was very much part of the Dominican charism. And we know that Carlo loved Francis of Assisi and Padre Pio. He was drawn to that Franciscan lifestyle. They had interests. They knew about politics. Frassati knew about politics, whereas Carlo knew about technology. After that, the similarities are, and the way they died, polio and leukemia. After that, they both lived in Italy most of their lives. By the way, this gives you a glimpse into the pathetic nature of my life. The Venn diagram is green and red, like the Italian flag. And that just had the circles. That's the attention to detail. Again, I guess. They both had a strong devotion to the Eucharist and were daily mass goers. They both were apologists in their own way, meaning they defended the faith in their own way. They both served the poor, oftentimes unseen, it was unremarkable. They didn't make a big stink out of it. I've heard this on social media at some point. Next time you go to serve the poor in a soup kitchen, leave your camera at home.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Listen, I get why certain institutions will say, like churches, our church does this. Oh, the kids served at St. Ben's meal program, you have pictures of it. But is it really about serving the poor if I'm going like, hey, look at what I'm doing? You know what I mean? Just something, but not judging, just putting it out there. They both had hobbies. Obviously, an outdoorsman. He loved playing soccer and playing video games. Another similarity is that they died young, and they both had funeral attendances that were off the charts. And another thing they have in common, when they were canonized, the Vatican both gave them a stamp. They each have their own stamp in the Vatican, which is the smallest city-state in the world, so it's its own country, if you didn't know that. All right, last thing I wanted to say is, it's not the last thing I'm going to say. We don't need saints to reach God. God uses saints to reach us. I love this, I love this, I love this. And I say this like anytime I talk about saints. I don't know who said this. I've looked, and I can't find the origin of this. At some point, because I said it so much, pretty soon I'm just going to put Al McCauley under it like it's mine. I might even copyright it or something. And why do I love this? Because again, non-Catholics don't understand why we Catholics like saints. And a lot of the reason isn't because we worship them or anything else. We have saints in our lives because God puts them there to redirect us to himself. The same way he does that with nature, like a cardinal or whatever else you think of a loved one who's passed on, that's to redirect ourselves toward God. Saints, God uses them to get to us. We don't need them. We can go right to the big guy. We should. But saints help us to go back to him in a better way. I'm going to give you 3 lessons and then I'll be done. This went longer than I should. I'm sorry, I just talked too much. 3 lessons I think they both give. This is the hardest one. In fact, this is scary. Holiness is accessible to all of us. It's too easy to say, I'm never going to be a saint because I'm not going to do A, B, and C. We're all called to be saints. We're all called to live this life in the ordinariness of our lives. Isn't it true the little things tick us off the most? Who did not put the toothpaste cap back on? Who took the last ice cube and did fill up the tray? Don't get me started on the toilet paper one. You know what I'm saying? That could be a bad thing. The point is, those little things, I can do these things because I'm thinking of the other. Those little moments are all around us all the time. These guys were just normal next door neighbor type guys. But their faith is what made them extraordinary, not what they did. That's important to remember. We all have that same ability, is what I'm saying. Find meaning in your life. Don't just look for the happiness. Look for something that's permanent, like the joy. Look for purpose, hopefully in Christ. And then the last thing, that joy and authenticity, be real. They didn't care if people made fun of them because they were living that authentic joy. They were just genuinely who they are. If you're a target, you meet somebody and they say, will you pray for me? Don't care about people looking. Be authentic. This is my faith. I'm going to live it out. That's what I would say. They teach us these lessons. With that, I'm going to say, thanks for being here. I just just want to be respectful of your time, so I apologize if I went a little long. Do you have any questions or comments or thoughts, please?
They're beautiful young women.
Oh,
Men.
yeah.
Didn't they have girlfriends?
Oh, well, you know what's interesting? We have the letters of Frassati. There was a girl that he loved, and he was thinking about proposing, but he was at a point where he was still in college. He was going to be an engineer. She was off away doing whatever she was doing, and he came to the conclusion, he wrote his sister a letter saying, I came to the conclusion that God does not want me to be married to her, but I do love her. He didn't become a priest or anything, obviously he passed away, but so Carlo might have been too young, but Giorgio did. He was a hit with the ladies because he was good looking, and he was just himself. He was a magnet of joy, so. Yes, please.
Did Carlo's mother have a child or?
I think they have another one or two after Carlo.
Yeah.
Two children, yeah.
The anniversary of the
That I don't know about the one on the anniversary. I don't know that. I do know that his mother has said, I am all in on this because of my son. She has come back to the church in a very strong, faith-filled way because of his example. I'm not saying you're wrong. I just didn't know that. Yeah. Twins. Okay, thank you. Oh. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you being here. Thanks for staying a little longer. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for being here. I love coming here. This is such a great parish. Seriously, I mean it.